We got the Bills on the practice field today. Their second day of practice this week. They practiced yesterday. They're on the field today. And our man Chris Brown is standing by live on the sidelines outside the Ad Pro Sports Training Center for an update on today's Buffalo practice. Hello, Chris Brown. Come in, Chris. Come in. Hello, Chris.
Afternoon. A little windy out here today, but feeling a little like September, which is fast approaching. So back on the field here and getting ready to work there and stretch now behind me.
The first questions we have for you, unfortunately, going to deal with injuries, some of the leftover injuries of last week. And let me just start firing names at you, Chris. What do you see from Mitch Morris today at this Monday practice?
I'm sorry, you just broke up there on me, so I didn't hear the last part of that. Were you asking about somebody specifically?
Mitch Morris.
Yeah, I mean, he's dressed for practice as he has been. I mean, he practiced yesterday, but in what capacity, we don't really know, but still in the protocol to our knowledge. So we'll have to see if things change here. But knowing that it's a closed practice, we really won't get to see any team portions to know if he's out of the protocol. We're just going to have to check with the powers that be to see what the verdict is on that. I can tell you Tre'Davious White is dressed for practice. It's a pads practice, and he's fully decked out in his pads. So we'll have to see what his level of participation is. Maybe he's only limited, but certainly a good sign as he's trying to come back from that thigh contusion that he suffered in Friday's game.
What about Quentin Spain, the left guard?
Yes. Yeah, he's on the bike with a couple other guys here. Mike Love still not participating, and DeAndre Wesley, the other offensive lineman, not participating either. So those guys still spectators at this point.
You know, because of the nature of the fourth preseason game, you wonder, even if they were healthy or normally healthy, relatively healthy, if Quentin Spain and Mitch Morris would play at all this coming Thursday night anyway, right, Chris? Aren't we in that kind of a mode right now?
Yeah, I would anticipate that. You just have to ask yourself, despite all the time that Mitch Morris has missed, is it more important that he plays in the last preseason game or more important that he plays week one at the Jets? I think there's a pretty easy answer to that. So I think all of us are expecting that even if Mitch Morris comes out of concussion protocol today, tomorrow, or the next day, that he's not going to play in that game against the Vikings.
Right, yeah, and that makes sense. What about it'll be interesting to see how the offensive line lines up now with Mitch Morris out, with Quentin Spain out as well. I know Cody Ford moved out to right tackle has done that off and on. Is he going to play right guard? Is he going to play right tackle? Is he going to play left guard? Spencer Long is in the mix. Feliciano's obviously in the mix. Wyatt Teller. And also last week, Ike Butker came in before Wyatt Teller made his appearance. So how all that's going to shake out still remains to be seen.
And you didn't include Ty Nsekhe, who was still coming back from knee soreness. So if he's back in the mix, do they deem the right side of the line better with Nsekhe and Ford there at right guard? And then, do you have Feliciano at center if Morris is not back? And then who does that put at left guard? Is it Ike Butker? Is it Spencer Long? So, yeah, a lot of moving parts still this late in the game. Certainly not what they wanted, but they got to make the best of a tricky situation right now.
Oh, Brownie, it's giving me a headache. I've been worried about the offensive line for 3 weeks, and we have no answers. We may not get answers
Worry
this
about
week.
what you can. Worry about what you can control, Murph. Don't worry about the things you can't control.
All right. Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, well, that makes my list really short about if I'm worried about it, no question.
Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com on the sidelines at practice. All right, I can't control this either. But wide receivers, look, things got interesting the last couple of games here, preseason games, right? With the emergence of Duke Williams, with the playing time that Zay Jones got. I don't know where that's. I don't worry about this, and this is not giving me a headache, but I think that's worth watching on this cut-down week, isn't it? The picture they're going to wind up with at wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I know people are saying a lot of things about a lot of guys. It was interesting on Sunday when Coach McDermott was asked specifically about Robert Foster. He said that Robert's been dealing with a toe and mentioned that it's been since the spring. And so you wonder if that has compromised or convinced the coaching staff to lighten his load, so to speak, so he's as healthy as possible going into the season, and that, the lack of seeing him in preseason games has more to do with that than perhaps anything else. I mean, only the coaching staff knows what their true motivation is. And then on top of that, I think you've got 3 guys that are primarily working for that presumably 6th receiver spot. You're talking about Ray McCloud, Isaiah McKenzie, and Duke Williams. And we've talked about how Duke is in stark contrast to the kind of receivers that McKenzie and McCloud are. I think it's just going to be a very difficult decision for them in terms of what they want. If you remember last year, right around midseason, when they added McKenzie, gave McCloud a little bit more playing time on the back half of the schedule, it was an offense that Coach Dable thought was sorely in need of speed. And those 2 guys provided that, McKenzie more so than even McCloud. Now we're at a point where this is a receiving core that lacks true size. So does it have enough speed to take the size with the 6th spot, or do they still feel that they need more speed in their receiving core and they need a short, quick, jitterbug kind of guy that can execute the jet sweep that we saw McKenzie execute for the touchdown in the game on Friday? And then we saw McCloud make a play late in the game in the second half. And obviously we all know the play that Duke Williams made. So it's really going to be, I think it's going to come down. I mean, they're all worthy of a roster spot, if you ask me. I think they're all capable of playing NFL football. The question is, what ultimately do they feel they need the most? What is lacking in this receiving core more than anything else? And that might get them to a spot where they pick the guy who they feel fills that void the best.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Brownie. I think it's going to come down to all their contributions on special teams, what they have on their roster for sure in John Brown, Cole Beasley, Zay Jones, all of those guys, and what they want to either complement those guys or add depth to those guys, and what contributions other than depth they can make on special teams, and what kind of mix that is. I don't know that Duke Williams, I think he's been out on special teams. He's a bigger physical guy. Yep. He's shown, and he certainly has not wasted his opportunity in the last couple of weeks. Ray McCloud, is he the same thing as Isaiah McKenzie? Is Isaiah McKenzie better? Or offer a different or not as good contribution as Ray McCloud. I mean, all that stuff's got to go into the hopper, and unless you're in the staff meeting, you don't know what the individual coaches think about these guys personally, off the field, what they are in the locker room, who they want to coach, and who they think has the best upside. That's all stuff that we'll never know until the final roster comes out.
Right, and I think the interesting thing there, too, is some of the lengths that they have gone to diversify the skill sets of each of those guys, whether it's Duke Williams playing on punt units to block, whether it's Ray McCloud going from being solely a return man on special teams to playing gunner, to playing punt coverage, kick coverage. So they're trying to diversify the roles for all of these guys. And let's not forget what Coach McDermott said last week also. There is a level of expectation on the part of the receivers to block in the running game. That was an aspect that was sorely lacking from the receiving core last year. It's one of the main reasons that Zay Jones put on 8 pounds of lean muscle mass so he could be bigger and stronger in the run game. We've seen Robert Foster block in the run game before. Has he gotten better at that? And then you go down the line, Duke Williams is certainly a guy that has shown he's capable of blocking in the run game. How effective are guys like Ray McCloud and Isaiah McKenzie, guys of smaller stature? Are they effective enough in the run game to block downfield? If not, are they not going to be on the field in those situations? And does that make your offense more predictable? There's so many layers here to kind of navigate through that I think some of these decisions may surprise people, but you have to believe the methodical nature of Coach McDermott and his staff. They're going to be going through this with a fine-tooth comb.
With Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com, on the field watching practice. And we're talking to him about today's practice. Bills getting set for preseason game number 4. And the interest in the wide receiving core, Chris. And look, this is the only way I know how to ask this. What's your level of certainty, percentage-wise, that both Zay Jones and Robert Foster are on the roster after Saturday, 4 p.m.?
I would say 75-25.
Okay. I think I agree with that. Mm-hmm. Others don't feel that firmly about it, Steve.
Yeah, I know.
It bothers me that Robert...
They're basing it solely on playing time and amount of plays that have been made in preseason. And I get that, because a lot of times that is what is the final that's what helps coaches, come down on a final point, like this is where I'm coming down on this guy based on what he did in the preseason. But after hearing Coach McDermott talk about the faith that he had in Robert Foster making the kinds of plays that he needs to make after the first preseason game against Indianapolis, and then hearing him just yesterday talk about a possible toe problem that Robert's been, working his way through. Maybe it's some nagging thing that we're unaware of because injuries don't have to be fully disclosed this time of year. It's leaning me more in favor of him being on this roster. And I think what he thinks of Zay Jones and all the roles that Coach Dable has him playing, he knows all of the receiver positions in this offense. And I don't know that there's anybody else on the roster that does, especially knowing that Beasley and Brown are new to this scheme. So I think there's hidden value in those two guys that maybe not everyone's seeing right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think the thing about Robert Foster, he did splash so big last year at a time when the team was looking for somebody to play well. Being able to catch the deep ball and having one of the top yards per catch averages in the league last year in the last 6 or 8 games of the season. Do you think he's shown enough in other aspects of his game to do something other than just get the deep ball? Can he run intermediate routes? Has he had a chance to do that? Does he have the ability to be a bigger part of the offense than he was a year ago? Because I think that's probably what it's going to take for him to make it.
Well, if you look at the last 3 games of the season last year, he was doing that. He wasn't just running go routes anymore. He was running some of those deep crossers. He was running some underneath routes. He was getting in those hook zones. So they were diversifying his skill set over those last 3 games of the season last year when they were making a conscious effort to push younger players onto the field, both on offense and defense. And I think they felt that Robert was at a point where he was capable of diversifying, the kinds of route assignments he was going to be tasked with. And we saw that in the last 3 games of the year last year. I know we're kind of far removed from that, but he was doing that towards the end of last season.
Chris Brown is with us on the practice field. The Bills just getting ready to go, getting started with their practice today. Getting ready for preseason game number 4, Chris. And look, one of the big questions going into preseason this year was the running back crew. I want to ask you about that because after 3 preseason games and anticipating that Gore and McCoy and maybe even Singletary won't see any action at all this Thursday night against Minnesota, I have to say I don't have a clear picture of their intentions on how to use those running backs or what the pecking order might be than it was a month ago when camp began. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing that Sonoris Perry has over T.J. Yeldon, it's the special teams expertise. And if you're going to be the 4th running back, you better be on all the special teams units. And I don't know that T.J. Yeldon can say that. So I think that's where Perry may have an edge. Some people might say, well, I mean, T.J. Yeldon was the number 2 running back coming out of the state of Alabama as a high schooler and, played at Alabama and was successful as a national champion and is certainly talented, and I don't think any of us can argue that. But it's what kind of fit he is for the Bills. And the fit they're looking for from their 4th running back is someone that can perform on special teams and be pretty versatile in that area because he's not going to be getting a lot of carries in games on Sundays with 3 guys in front of him. So the value kind of shifts from almost we'll take a running back who might be maybe just a shade under what T.J. Yeldon is as a running back because he offers so much more over here in this phase of the game. And those are the things that I think go by the board sometimes when people on the outside looking in are scratching their head over roster decisions. But those are the kinds of decisions that this coaching staff is going to make because they value special teams and know with a new coordinator they're going to have to get him as many experienced guys as possible to kind of put that puzzle together this season.
And you've talked about the bottom of the running back depth chart. What about the top of the depth chart? Again, anticipating the top 2 and maybe top 3 guys won't even play Thursday. How are they going to use these 3? How are they going to space out their reps? What do you for?
You mean when they get to the regular season? I understand it now. Okay, yeah. I mean, I still think that McCoy is going to be the first guy through the rotation, but I think anybody that believes that LaShawn McCoy is going to reach 200 carries if all 3 of those guys are healthy all season long, I just don't see it. I think we have to remember that LaShawn, in some of his most productive seasons here, averaged about 18.5 carries a game, if memory serves. I want to go back to the 2016 season. He averaged 18.5 carries a game. So now we're 3 years removed from that. You've got guys who are certainly capable in Frank Gore and Devin Singletary. So I'm anticipating more of a committee approach, quite frankly, and I don't think we should be surprised by that. for a couple of reasons. Number one, Devin Singletary has proven himself more than capable of handling not just the early down types of plays, but he's handled pass protection. He's shown he's got a receiving ability through the course of the preseason. So I think there's going to be a package of plays for him every week. Gore, we know what he can do. McCoy, we know what he can do. So now you say, let's put them all together and use them when we need to use them. And if you go back to Brian Dable's coaching tree, I think you're going to see a very similar model with the running back rotation to what we see in New England. Is LaShawn McCoy the James White? Is Frank Gore the Rex Burkhead? And is Devin Singletary the guy you kind of sprinkle in and mix in for a set of fresh legs maybe in the third quarter? So I think that's probably what we're going to be looking at this season.
What about the tight end? How are they going to shake out? Who do we see? Is there any change to that roster and how they're lining up?
Well, I haven't really had a chance to get a good look at them. They're on the other field over there. But I think the biggest issue here is Tyler Kroft. He's a guy that is still on active PUP right now. I think what his prognosis is on the inside, which we don't know, in terms of a potential return, could impact the tight end group. And what I mean by that is if they're not expecting him to be ready week 1, 2, 3, well, in my estimation, you're probably best served putting him on reserve PUP, which means he's not able to come back and begin practicing until week 7. And then that affords you time. You can buy time. So now, if you want to keep 4 tight ends, you keep the 2 rookie draft choices, you keep Jason Kroom, you keep Lee Smith, and off you go for the first half of the season. And then you figure it out later if and when Kroft comes back and looks good and healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the route they take when they get to roster cutdown time this weekend. If for some reason Tyler Kroft has some miraculous recovery, they know he'll be ready by week 2, well, then that changes the dynamic completely. And if you're going based on body of work here through the course of the preseason, I hate to say it, but I think Jason Kroom is probably on the outside looking in.
Kroom did not play. I watched him warm up Friday in Detroit, and he was like an active, vigorous warm-up, but he did not play, and I assume he's getting close, right? Right?
Well, he came back. He was limited in practice through the course of the early part of last week, and then all of a sudden he sat practice on Wednesday. I was like, oh, boy, that's not good.
Right.
And we never got a full diagnosis on what his situation was. But certainly that's not good. He came back for 2 days in a limited capacity. I don't know if he was ever a full practice participant, again, because we're not watching practice start to finish anymore. And then Wednesday he's watching, and that was not a good sign. So I'm concerned for his long-range potential here based on the fact that he just can't stay on the field right now. We know, guys, the number one ability in the NFL is availability.
Right. And I think Dawson Knox, even though he didn't catch a pass the other night, he had a couple of – he had the nice block on the outside to spring Devin Singletary for the touchdown of the game. Did you get a chance to evaluate what you thought of his game as the first time he had a chance to play?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you, Steve. I was surprised with his effectiveness blocking, especially after a long layoff. He's off the field for a few weeks with the hamstring injury, and I think everybody would anticipate that in short order he'd get back in the flow in terms of the passing game. But knowing that the clear game plan in this preseason game was to show an ability to run the football, reset the line of scrimmage, and really get those things moving, the fact that he was an active participant in that and actually held his own, now, I'm not going to say he was out there dominating, but he didn't look like he didn't belong. And to come off a 3-week layoff and show an ability to do that, I thought was a very good sign for Dawson Knox going forward.
Chris Brown, we got a few minutes left with Chris. He's out on the practice field as the Bills are getting going on their Monday morning practice, ready for Thursday night's game. Just about the defense for a minute, Chris. Anybody in particular on the defensive side of the ball that you think this week is especially important for at any position, at any level of the defense? Who needs to practice well and play well Thursday to earn the right to stick around here? Anybody come to mind?
Eddie Yarborough is a guy that's really going to have to scrape and claw. With Mike Love on the shelf this week, he may have an extended opportunity, and that's one of the guys he's battling against. He's been behind Mike Love and Darryl Johnson, the 7th-round draft pick, pretty much since training camp got underway, and he has been unable to leapfrog them on the depth chart. He's been running with the 3rd team a lot of the time, occasionally the 2nd team. So if Love is not in the lineup this week, that should afford him a monster opportunity. he's just got to hope it's not too little too late, because it's proven tough for him to get ahead of those two guys. Mike Love kind of redeveloped his body in the offseason, added 8 to 9 pounds of lean muscle mass, looks faster and quicker off the ball. He's made a difference. He took the off-season program that the strength and conditioning staff gave him here in his exit interview last year and maximized it to the hilt. And it's made a difference for him. The coaching staff's noticed. He's been rewarded for it in terms of where his reps are coming with the second unit. And so now, you look at that group. Are they going to keep 5 defensive ends? If they are, Mike Love or Daryl Johnson are probably 4 or 5, knowing Jerry, Trent Murphy, and Jerry Hughes Jerry, Trent Murphy, and Shaq Lawson are the top 3. So that's kind of where it's at right now. So I think Eddie Yarborough's got to have a big game.
How likely is it that I'm talking about move this back to the linebackers? I know you're going to keep probably 8 defensive linemen. If you keep 9 defensive linemen and all of a sudden Eddie Yarborough is one of those, no, it wouldn't be one of those. It would be Daryl Johnson.
No, I don't
would be
think
the
it
9th.
would be.
Right, it would be Daryl Johnson would be the 9th, and then what do you do at line?
4 DTs.
Right, and then what about linebacker? Do you keep anybody? You're going to take Vashawn Joseph. You're going to let him go. That's your 7th linebacker right now. Then you're starting to get into some problems with your numbers on that side of the ball.
Right, I think they're only keeping 6 linebackers. So yeah, that might be a place where there's a surprise cut, and you hope you can sneak somebody on the practice squad, provided they have practice squad eligibility. So there are going to be a lot of tough decisions here, guys, and at a lot of positions, not just 1 or 2. I mean, D-end, as we just mentioned, linebacker, as Steve just mentioned, wide receiver, tight end, running back. I mean,
what are they going to, and also
run down the list. It's going to be hard.
And there's some cornerbacks over there that can really go, and they're like sitting at 6th, 7th on the roster depth chart. I mean, you can't keep 7 corners. I mean, they're going to let some guys who can really play and who have played well for the team. They're going to have to be cut loose.
Yeah, and I think we kind of recognized that in the early going, guys, that this was going to be a hard roster to make this season. And there are probably going to be 5, 6, maybe 7 players who get cut from this roster who you're going to see end up on other rosters and play on Sunday this season.
We're with Chris Brown. A couple minutes left as he joins us from the Bills practice field. They don't have a decision to make on Ed Oliver, their first-round draft pick, Chris, but it's been a quiet 3 preseason games for Ed Oliver, and yet I'm not worried about him, right? I mean, I think they'll get him in the regular rotation up front, and I think they'll design specific packages with Ed Oliver in mind. I'm not worried about him, even though he has been relatively quiet through 3 preseason games.
Yeah, I don't know if I would agree with quiet for the preseason. I think he's been pretty disruptive. Now, I know he doesn't have the sack totals, doesn't necessarily have the quarterback hits, but I made a point of watching him in the game on Friday, and I thought he was getting consistent push. He had a couple of wins on some swim and rip moves that seemed to work really good for him. He was getting doubled, too. So I'm pretty encouraged by what we're seeing from him because he hasn't even come close to putting it all together yet. I thought he's played pretty well. I thought he played very well in the first preseason game against probably one of the top 2 guards in football in Quentin Nelson. So I think his arrow's pointing up. He's on the ascent right now, and when he puts it all together, he's going to be a menace. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I was talking to Lee Smith in the locker room last week, and I was talking to him about a player on offense, who kind of ticks people off, and he said, well, yeah, that guy's the Ed Oliver of the offense. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Ed's in practice, and he's ticking people off every day because he's just a menace. He's tough to handle. He's really low off the snap because he's built so low to the ground, and he's giving the offensive lineman fits every single day. So quiet preseason maybe in terms of numbers, but not in terms of performance from where I sit.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. Ed Oliver is, I think he's more of a help to the entire defense than he is a personal, going to get personal stats. I think there are a lot of guys who are going to benefit from him. Also, a guy like Trent Murphy, who I know he had a really nice sack and another hurry in Carolina. How's Trent Murphy looked? I mean, we've done a couple of stories, and every time we talk about him, he's like a different guy this year. Is that going to continue to be the case?
I mean, from what I've seen, I would say yes. The thing that we did not see from him last year, ever, at least that I can remember, in terms of winning is one-on-one matchups up front, was a consistent inside move, and he has got an inside move that he has flashed this preseason that I did not see from him last year. And I think it's because he has the confidence to drive off that bad leg that, had the ACL injury and work back up inside. And he's done that a few times. He won on a play against Detroit on Friday where he just totally got the tackle to overset, and he came up under him, and he was in on the quarterback, flushing Stafford out of the pocket. So all signs from Murphy are encouraging, but see the diversification of his game back in full force, I think, is what's going to help him more than anything rack up numbers for this team this season.
Hey, Chris, before we let you go, just a question about, the overriding issue in the NFL the last 36 hours, Andrew Luck's retirement. I can't think of any real strong connections from the Bills' current roster or coaching staff to Andrew Luck, but I'm sure they'll have some thoughts about it, probably be asked about it after practice today, huh?
Yeah, I would anticipate that. I don't know if Trent Murphy, I'm trying to remember if Trent Murphy's career crossed paths with Andrews at Stanford. I believe it did. Harrison obviously was a little too late to run across him as a college teammate. But I believe Trent spent at least a year, maybe two, with Andrew Luck at Stanford. So he would obviously be a target for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trent kind of reached out to him, knowing the player and the teammate that he is. So, yeah, I mean, everybody's got to do what's best for them. And I think, there's been a lot of hard-headed people on social media that don't seem to get that and are more worried about the state of their fantasy team after drafting Andrew Luck than they are about the person. And that's a shame that we live in that kind of a world. But, Andrew's got to do what's best for him and his family, and I think everybody's got to respect that. Nobody's mandated to play NFL football, and if it's not what's for him, then go do something else. And that's what he's going to do, and more power to him.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's his call ultimately. The timing of it makes you kind of raise your eyebrows. I know how hard it is to rehab. I did it for a ton of my career as well. It's no fun. It's zero fun. In fact, when you get to a point in your career, and I'll bet Andrew Luck is in this same shape where you've had so many injuries over the course of your career, you can't even train when you're healthy the way you want to train because you have to train around scar tissue and bad wheel here, bad elbow there, bad whatever. So I get how you get worn down. That's why a lot of guys do it. I am shocked that after 7 years, he's had enough of it. But his litany of injuries it's nothing to take for granted. It's a long list.
Yeah,
hey, Chris,
timing not good, but when it's time, it's time.
I just looked it up. It looks like they may have played 3 years together at Stanford, so he'd be a good guy to talk to about that.
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
Chris, thank you.
Thanks
for getting us updated here, and I hope we get a chance to check with you tomorrow. I think we will. Thanks, Chris.
All right, we'll see you then, guys.